What's up mga ka-watchers, this is your Sir Nikolai, and today we're going to continue our discussions regarding myth and traditional literature. So let's have a recap. So last week I gave you two major contending views of myth. The first is that it is the opposite of truth, myth as fantasy. In this definition, myth becomes synonymous with falsehood. With this kind of conception, one may say expressions such as that's only a myth as an equivalent for that's not real. For example, the Epic of Gilgamesh may be viewed as a work of imagination for its fantastic elements, meaning it did not really happen. It is just a myth. For the so-called learners, it is an unsophisticated, irrational, and unscientific understanding of the world. So the second definition is that it is not the opposite of truth. Myth as narrative. It is because the word myth comes from the Greek word mythos, which means stories concerning the early history of a certain community. These stories may be exaggerated, twisted, and its historical truths may be lost in translations. If these stories over time create a movement or a belief system, then this story stops to function as a mere story or a mere narrative and may start to function as a myth. This is what actualization means. It is the exaltation of these mere events into a myth. In this state, myth becomes a container of truths in which it becomes a schema of human behavior. It doesn't matter whether these events are true or false, because its essence is not its veracity, but its purpose. Just imagine a timeline. The closer it gets to its origin, the more a myth becomes factual, and the farther it gets from its origin, the lesser it becomes factual, but the more it becomes meaningful. But what makes myth meaningful? The answer is the poetical truths. For example, the Epic of Gilgamesh may not be a historical or factual account, but still contains poetical truths such as tyranny, chaos, and redemption that are continuously being extracted and reenacted for thousands and millions of years. And this reenactment is what the word actualization means. It is the conversion of mere words into poetical deeds. So what gives myth the power to convert mere words into actions? What exactly is this force? Why is it that a mythical story, for example, in Greece, contains parallelisms with other mythical stories in Southeast Asia, like the Philippines? For example, if the Greeks have Zeus, we also have Bathala. If the Mesopotamians have Tiamat, then we also have the Minokawa. Why are they similar? So, let me explain first. So this is because of the archetype. So archetypal figures are primarily shared experiences revealed through myths across cultures. It is social in nature and may assume different forms depending on which culture it is being circulated. Like languages that differ from the surface level, but similar in its deep structure, myths themselves may also look different in their methods of delivery, but identical when analyzed archetypically. It is the same reason we can detect similarities and parallelisms among stories, whatever culture it originated. On the other hand, the word archetype, the archetype, the Jungian archetype, is an explanatory re-articulation of the Platonic eidos. It is fundamentally created from bottom up. Its origins are primordial and it's very old and has been in existence for millions of years, in which it becomes part of our psyche and biology. So it resides within the collective unconscious, a sort of psychical cloud, which can only be detected through its archetypal figures. In other words, the archetype reside in the unconscious part of the brain, which can only be detected through the revelation of its archetypal figure, that can only be consciously extracted from dreams and myths. So an example of this archetype is the hierarchy. So hierarchies are not just social constructions. These are not just human inventions, but hierarchies have biological and psychological foundations. Hierarchies are older than trees. Lobsters, for example, according to Jordan Peterson, he said that lobsters exist in dominance hierarchies, meaning lobsters have been in this world for millions of years. That means hierarchies have been preserved for an extremely long time. And what is prevalent across time is real. And I believe that destroying real things will lead to chaos and catastrophe. So hierarchies are not just social constructions. So we have to be very careful, all right, dismantling and destroying these hierarchies, because we don't know what will be the outcome of the destruction of these archetypal structures. So we have to be careful. So another example of archetypal figures, for example, you have the trickster or the shadow. You also have chaos, which is metaphorically represented by the Great Mother, and also order, which is metaphorically represented by the Great Father, and the Logos, which is the archetypal hero that extracts order out of chaos. So we have a lot of archetypes, okay, but these are just some of the examples that I can give. But let me overemphasize, all right? The Jungian archetype is different from the archetypal figure, all right? The Jungian archetype is 2 steps away from reality, okay? It is similar with Plato's eidos, or these ideal forms. All right, so we have to realize that myths are still with us today in the present time. In the past, we can read these stories from ancient manuscripts, from inscriptions, but in the present day, we don't read these myths in these ancient materials, but we encounter these myths in the cinema. Okay, we pay our votive offerings in the cashier, all right, and then we watch it in the silver screen, and we're being influenced and entertained by the characters. And then after watching the movie, we emulate these characters. We apply these things that we've learned in real life, and after emulating it, we buy their artifacts, for example, t-shirts and sculptures, right? And we display it in our houses. Okay? So what is the point here? It is not that myth is unimportant in the modern times. Hindi nagbago yung myth. What changed are actually its methods of delivery. For example, the Avengers, for example, the Marvel characters, and also the DC superheroes. These are not modern inventions, but these are just reimaginations of ancient structures. For example, the character of Superman. So he's not a modern creation, but he is an amalgamation of the various mythological characters that can be read from ancient manuscripts. Likewise, for example, Thor. Though, it's obviously he is actually representing the Norse thunder god Thor, but we all know that his character is a recreation of that particular myth. Also, we have Batman or Wolverine, and these are actually anti-heroes similar to the character of Gilgamesh, right? So these characters are not original or modern inventions, but they are recreations and reimaginations of a much older narrative. Okay, However, we have to take note that the anachronistic nature of myth is no match against the progressivism of science, and this results in the rise of ideologies. Ideologies replace myth in the modern era. People become avatars of ideologies. They become ideologues. And this is dangerous because ideologies are malevolent imitations of myth. As we saw in the communist China and USSR, millions of people died. However, it is also the same with myth. We also have to be careful. Like Hitler's superior race myth, which led to the death of millions of Jews. And also the Japanese Imperial Army, with their belief that they're just following the commands of a sun god. It resulted in the atrocities of World War II. So myth is destructive and creative as well. So it is very important for us to study these myths in order for us to separate the good from the bad.